Thank you for joining us today. I have with me my friend Kelvin Geortzen, who is of course our Minister of Education, and I thank Kelvin and his team for the tremendous work that they've been doing. Just 2.5 weeks ago, we took the precautionary steps of announcing the temporary closure of Manitoba schools to protect the health and well-being of our students and of course of our staff as well. And this was done out of an abundance of caution to begin the exercise of flattening the COVID curve for the protection of each and every one of us. Today I want to talk about the value of a good education. I owe everything that I have today to the values of a good education. I want to say a thank you to my parents for instilling in me the importance of receiving and working to achieve a quality education. I want to thank all the educators I've had in my life for inspiring me, and all of the teachers I have had in my life for helping me to find whatever success I have found. I think all of us in Manitoba feel the same way when we reflect on the values of a good education and our benefits achieved as a consequence of that education. We should never take that for granted. A quality education here in Canada and right here in Manitoba is essential. And it's important in unprecedented times like these to ensure as much continuity as possible in the education of our children. We owe this to our children. Je tiens à remercier mes parents d'avoir installé en moi l'importance de recevoir une éducation de qualité. Je tiens à remercier tous les éducateurs que j'ai eus dans ma vie, de m'avoir inspiré, et tous les enseignantes qui j'ai eues dans ma vie aussi, qui m'ont permis de réussir. Nous ne devrions jamais tenir pour acquis notre capacité à offrir une éducation de qualité ici au Canada et ici même au Manitoba. Il est important, en des temps sans précédent comme celui-ci, d'assurer autant de continuité dans l'éducation de nos enfants. Nous le devons à nos enfants. Our community depends upon making sure that our children remain engaged in their educational practices. In the past, we may have taken this for granted. We do not do so now. We are preparing and ensuring that we are resilient through this time of turmoil. Resilient economically, resilient financially, resilient socially. We'll face the challenges that are presented to us by this pandemic, like the Manitoba bison faces a storm, head on, protecting its young. Manitobans have a long history of dealing with challenges, whether it's floods in the spring or drought in the summer. Manitobans have always risen to the challenge by stepping up and helping one another, and they're doing that now. I say thank you to Manitobans for this. Resiliency matters. Education matters. Both are essential to us bouncing back, as we will, from this pandemic's challenges. And quality education will be vital in our economic recovery long after this pandemic passes. Each of us, all of us together, are facing challenges in extraordinary times. Today, the Minister of Education will be announcing steps to make sure that our children have access to quality education. I want to say thank you to all of our educators, all of our concerned parents as well, and all of Manitoba's students. We're all doing the best we can. We're taking these temporary steps today to protect our most valuable services, to protect our healthcare system, and to protect our most important citizens, our children. I said yesterday's announcement was not an easy thing to do. Today's decision is easier to do because it protects those who we value the most, our children, and their education, and because it's the right thing to do. We're going to flatten the COVID curve, and as we do, we ensure that all of us and our loved ones have a healthy Manitoba, not only today, but tomorrow as well. And now the announcement from our Education Minister, Kelvin Geortzen.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for your leadership during this time. I also want to thank my Deputy Minister, Grant Doak, and his team for the work that they've been doing during this unprecedented time in Manitoba generally and in Manitoba education specifically. They've worked tirelessly to help ensure that Manitoba students are able to continue learning during this time of classroom suspension. I also want to thank, as the Premier has already done, our teachers and the staff within our school system. They have taken on the challenge of ensuring that students continue to learn and progress, and they've done it with professionalism and passion, and we are tremendously proud of them. Today, following the advice of Manitoba's Chief Provincial Public Health Officer, we are announcing that Manitoba's K-12 schools will have their in-school classes suspended indefinitely for this school year. If prior to the regularly scheduled conclusion of the school year, the public health officer determines that it is safe to reopen our schools, then we would eagerly welcome our students back. School buildings will be closed, but child care centers will continue operating under the new guidelines, and teachers will be allowed to access their resources as they need to ensure that home learning continues. While this announcement will not be surprising to most, I am sure it'll still be disappointing to many. And it will cause a lot of questions, and let me try to answer some of them. Marks for all students will be baseline. They'll essentially be held at where they were at the last day of regular classes or exams, but students will be expected to continue learning during this in-school class suspension. They will have the opportunity to increase their mark through their additional learning while classes are suspended. Grade 12 provincial exams are canceled because they would not be a meaningful measure of a student's effort for this year given what is happening with COVID-19 and the pandemic, but students will be given assignments, final marks, and assessments. Teachers will be remotely teaching and assessing students who will receive a report card. While this continued learning will be difficult for younger students particularly, we are actively working with school divisions to find best practices and enhance their existing resources, and I was pleased to speak with leaders of our school divisions, the Manitoba Teachers Society, and the Manitoba Federation of Independent Schools this morning. For K-8 students, teachers will continue to engage with students and parents using existing communication tools and provide coaching and resources to parents so that their children can continue learning from home. Grade 9 to 12 students will continue to learn using online and distance resources, which we'll have more announcements on shortly as we work with partners to determine additional support that we can provide them. I want to address specifically those who are in grade 12, their final year of high school. No students will be held back because of COVID-19, and all those who are on track to graduate will graduate this year. But active engagement and learning is required as we proceed on with this school year. But whether the school year resumes or not before the end of June, I know this is not how grade 12 students envision their final year, a year that they and their families have looked forward to and worked so hard for so long. This past weekend, a former grade 12 classmate of mine posted a picture on social media of our graduation many, many years ago, and it immediately brought back so many memories of my graduation year, and it made me and reminded me that this is a decision that is not without consequence. I want grade 12 students to know and understand that while they may have some disappointment, the decisions that are being made today are made because we know they have an amazing future ahead of them. And we want to ensure that they can reach their fullest potential and that those they love the most are here to see them reach those great achievements. Thank you again to all those who've been working so hard in our education system to ensure that students continue to learn and make us proud during this unprecedented time. As the Premier has often said, we will get through this together.
Thanks so much, Kelvin, and thanks again for the tremendous leadership you're showing and the steady hand that you're applying as we deal with so many of these unprecedented issues. I'll just conclude by saying to all Manitobans, keep doing the right things to protect yourselves and to protect others. Remember that not every generation has the opportunity to save a life, but you do. You may be in fact saving your own life by following the directives of our medical advisors. You may also be saving the lives of family members, of friends, and of neighbors. Keep up the great work. Flattening the curve is in the hands of all of us, and it's vital we all do our part by practicing physical distancing, by remaining in self-isolation as much as possible. No one should think for a moment this pandemic does not affect them. This virus moves when people move. Be responsible. Your actions and decisions could impact not just yourself, but many others as well. Do your part. Stay home. Stay positive. Encourage each other. Help each other. Understand that these are temporary measures, and understand that Manitoba will be back. I applaud all of you who've taken measures to help slow the spread of this virus, but we will only know the full positive impacts of these measures in the coming weeks. So do your part, and together we will beat this thing. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Bernier. Just a reminder, each reporter is allowed a question and one follow-up, then we'll move on to the next reporter. And if the reporters could please introduce themselves before asking questions. First up, we have Canadian Press, Steve.
Steve Lambert from the Canadian Press. Mr. Geortzen, you mentioned grade 12 final exams. Does that go for all exams as well, or are canceled in terms of the finals?
Thank you, Steve. So we have assessments in other grades. There'll continue to be assessments, but when it comes to the grade 12 final exams, they won't be happening.
And as a follow-up, is there sort of a universal e-learning tool we're looking at, or is it going to be up to each school division and perhaps every school as to how to complete the term?
So it is obviously a bit of a challenge in different parts of the province. Our department has been working with the different schools and divisions, having daily calls with them. We're hearing really good reports. Teachers are doing an amazing job of delivering material to their students. Parents are doing great and helping along with their students, but we know that it's going to be a little bit uneven, as it often is. When we get to the new school year, if we're not able to complete this one, we'll certainly be baselining students, getting a sense of where they should be, where they are at, and then working on supplementary learning opportunities to ensure that students who have fallen behind are able to catch up.
Thank you.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Maggie. Maggie from the Free Press. From CJOB, Diana.
Good morning, Diana from 680 CJOB. Minister Geortzen, obviously you're saying no students will be held back as a result of this, but what happens if maybe students don't actively participate in their online coursework? What happens kind of in terms of consequences for that?
So we will ensure that there is special engagement with those students where there is challenges and difficulties, ensuring that they're remaining engaged. So far, our evidence has been that overall, students, and overwhelmingly, students have been participating, have been wanting to continue learning. Where that isn't happening for students in grade 12, we'll make sure that we have a special connection with them to ensure that that happens in the best way possible.
And this is clearly an unprecedented situation, but has there been discussion sort of with universities as far as obviously final marks are going to be kind of changing this year? It's not a school year as normal. Has there been any thought there?
So, I mean, we will have report cards that are issued this year, so there will be assessments that are still happening. I know that the minister responsible for post-secondary education has been in close contact with universities, and everybody does understand across the country and around the world that this is unprecedented, and there'll have to be some adjustments made when it comes to evaluations and understanding of the situation that we're in. But I know that those discussions have been happening with the minister responsible for post-secondary education.
From Global, Brittany.
Good morning, Brittany Greenslade with Global News. My question is for the Premier. What's happening to educational assistants and support staff during this time? Will they be paid, and how's that going to work?
Well, Brittany, if people are still working, they'll still be paid, and if they're not working, we have other programs we've paid into to assist people with cash flow. So we'll avail ourselves of those. I would mention, too, that in terms of the federal programming, we're getting more detail on that this afternoon. I understand the Finance Minister, Minister Morneau, is coming out to flesh out the federal government's plan to assist on the private sector side more than the public. But I think that's important for our people who work in the private sector or who own small businesses to know. And we'll be continuing to partner with the federal government and municipal governments in making sure that programming doesn't let people fall through the cracks.
And secondly, for both of you, what is your message to parents now who are going to be helping with some of this homeschooling at home for their kids, and specifically some of those older children who are going to be relying on getting those grades up as they're either graduating or going into their graduating year?
So, I mean, my experience in talking to parents so far has been, as Manitobans always are, they step up to the plate. They understand these are unprecedented times, and overwhelmingly they're doing their best with their young people. Some are actually finding unique and important ways to connect with their children at this time, and that's wonderful that it might give them that additional opportunity. But I also know that it is a struggle for others. And so we continue to be mindful of that and to support where we can in terms of resources for parents, whether that's online resources or otherwise, and there'll be more announcements in the days ahead. But I think overwhelmingly Manitobans are doing what Manitobans have always done, and that is saying we're going to step up, have the bison face the storm, and stepping into the challenges and making the best of a difficult situation. And I believe that when we come on the other side of this, there's going to be many things that we're going to see that are positive, and that we're going to have new understandings of ways that families connect, that schools connect, and it might be beneficial for us in the long run.
I'll just add that as a child, I had, like many of my era, numerous childhood diseases, not exclusively childhood diseases, I suppose, but red measles, scarlet fever, mumps, you name it, German measles. Some of my worst times were staying home from school during those diseases. Some of my best memories of my relationships with my mother and dad were during those very same times. So there's an opportunity here for families to build a stronger relationship that may not have been there before. I'm not trying to polish the situation to make it any easier, but when we rise to these challenges together, we'll create a memory for our children that they will, I expect, treasure. And so here's an opportunity for parents to be more involved directly in the education of their children than would be the case if the normal school year was resumed today. And I would encourage parents to put this in that perspective, and children to put it in that perspective too. This is a chance for you to perhaps learn a little bit more about your mother and father, and to build that relationship that's so important as you get older in life.
Next up is Stephanie from City News.
Stephanie from City News here. Minister Geortzen, just wondering if any supports will be provided to families who do not have the same access to technology that would allow them to complete the programs that other families might be able to.
Yeah, thank you. And it's an important question because we know that it can be not the same in every part of the province, both in terms of connectivity and the ability to ensure that resources are getting home. So we've been working closely with the school divisions to ensure that we can provide the best support possible to try to level that playing field and get those resources home where we can for those students who might not have the same sort of connectivity. And divisions and teachers have been doing a remarkable job as well. That doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly equal or perfect in every part of the province, and we are going to have some catch-up to do when normal classes resume. There's no question about that. But I think overwhelmingly everybody is doing their best, and officials in my department are doing their best to provide those resources where it is unequal.
I mentioned too, Stephanie, good question, that we have really worked hard to expand broadband in the province over the last 4 years, and that is going to assist right now tremendously, but we do know that there are families that are not well served currently, and so this is what the minister is taking into account with the planning that he and his department are doing, in partnership with school divisions, of course.
And then just a follow-up on what you mentioned earlier with marks and them being baseline from the last day of classes and not dipping down. Can you just clarify what that means? So a student can't get a worse mark than what they had when classes were suspended?
Right. So we won't, students' mark that they had at the time of suspension or their last exam will be the mark. That's the lowest mark that they can have, but they have, and this is important, they have opportunity to increase their mark and to do better, and I know that overwhelmingly students will want to do that. And so there is an incentive to continue to work, to continue to learn, not just because learning is an incentive unto itself, but because they will be rewarded with additional and more positive marks if they engage in that, and I think that they will overwhelmingly.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Gentlemen, Jeff from CTV. Is it fair to say you're suspending school now indefinitely, and you've come up with this plan? Are you pretty confident at this point that the odds are against schools opening again, and that the school year will be done via homeschooling, and we're going to have to wait to send kids back to classes in the fall?
So we don't make predictions like that, Jeff. We're hopeful. We're always hopeful as Manitobans. Nobody has a crystal ball to know when things will return to normal or start to move towards return to normal. We'll rely on the advice of our Chief Public Health Officer, and so we're not making predictions. We're looking at it each day as we can, but remaining hopeful on the future. But following the advice of those who are giving the advice when it comes to a health perspective.
Yeah, and a follow-up on an unrelated topic. Mr. Premier, we're hearing about some landlords still going forward with the rent increase tomorrow, and then telling tenants, well, there's going to be, we'll give you a credit or an adjustment. Can they do this? Have you heard of this? And are there penalties, if possible, possibly?
Haven't heard of it till your question, Jeff. Inappropriate. The rent increases that started at the start of the year were the only ones that were allowed, as far as I know. So we'll look into it. I don't believe that there is an opportunity to raise mid-year on tenants' agreements, but we'll have to have a look at it and see what the individual case is. Obviously, we've already taken steps to protect tenants. And we've taken steps that are, I believe, respectful of landlords and their rights and obligations as well, remembering that landlords have bills to pay as much as tenants do. But our steps taken thus far have been designed to protect people who are vulnerable right now and to lessen that vulnerability, and that's who we're going to continue to be concerned with. Speaking of that, if I could, I wanted to strongly encourage, because of today's announcement, I wanted to strongly encourage all our frontline healthcare workers to register their immediate needs for childcare so that we can continue to work with them to find placements for their children. Arguably, up until now, many may have made temporary arrangements and thinking that that would be adequate, but it won't be. So we're working very, very hard and have already helped hundreds of frontline workers find appropriate childcare, working with many of the centers that are cooperating in this effort. So I wanted to make sure that all our frontline healthcare workers know to register as soon as possible, because we do want to move to satisfy your needs, but we also want to move on to help others in frontline positions to find childcare as well. This is a real team effort, and I'm asking everybody to step up and do their part.
From CBC Manitoba, Bartley.
Vicky, CBC. Following up on Ms. Greenslade's question, Minister Geortzen, what layoffs do you envision within the educational system? And if you do not envision any layoffs, will you commit to no layoffs?
So Bartley, as you know, most of the employees within the education system aren't employees directly of the provincial government. They are of the school divisions. What I've said to school divisions is where you can use repurpose employees to ensure that there's value being added to students who are now learning at home, then do that. As best as you can, use those employees to ensure that students are having a better experience learning at home. But beyond that, if they need to make their own individual decisions with their employees, then they'll be doing that.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Premier, this announcement today goes a long way to giving Manitobans more certainty about how long physical distancing measures will be in place. Could you please give clear direction to Manitobans along the lines of what Dr. Bruceson has said, that this is not going to be a matter of weeks, but months?
I've been using the line, and I think you've reported it, Bartley, that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and the consequences, though not immediate, of ignoring good advice from health experts are going to be felt by yourself and by other people. So listen to the advice. Good hand hygiene will give you significant protection from a viral respiratory illness that's dangerous, and that is COVID-19. Regular hand washing with soap and water, at least 15 seconds. Make sure you dry your hands thoroughly. If you can, use an alcohol-based hand cleaner. Even if your hands are not visibly dirty, do that. It's especially important to clean your hands after coughing or sneezing. If you're caring for a sick person, it is really vital that you clean your hands regularly. Before, during, and after you prepare food. Before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, obviously. Cover your mouth. Make sure you cover your mouth and nose with a tissue whenever you can with coughing and sneezing. If you can cough and sneeze into your sleeve as an alternative, that's better. Throw used tissues in the garbage. Immediately wash your hands. Avoid close contact with anyone showing symptoms of a respiratory illness. 6 feet, 2 meters for you more modern Manitobans, such as coughing or sneezing. Like, avoid connecting with people who are coughing or sneezing. If you yourself are, self-isolate. Children and adolescents should avoid sharing food, sharing drinks, especially sippy cups, water bottles, things like that. Musical instruments, don't share your trombone. Just protect each other. Follow this advice. Make sure you do your best to do this. This is our duty, to protect ourselves and to protect those we love and to protect those we don't even know. Just protect each other. Follow this advice.
From CBC Radio Canada, Patrick.
Good morning, Patrick Foucault from Radio Canada. Just wondering if we will see here in Manitoba some sort of online tool like the Quebec government announces today their open school online program where they offer activities, books for online books for kids. Will we see something similar to that in Manitoba?
So Manitoba does have some online resources currently that we can provide, and we are providing to help support parents. We are going to have more announcements on the expansion of some online resources, some of which that currently exist in some parts of Manitoba and some school divisions that we're looking to expand and to broaden to all of Manitoba for certain grade levels. So there are going to be further announcements made shortly for the additional ability for students, particularly of certain age levels, to access more online learning.
Encore, il est important de temps sans précédent, comme celui-ci, d'assurer autant de continuité dans l'éducation de nos enfants. Nous le devons à nos enfants.
Merci, messieurs. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure if my line cut or not. Thank you very much.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Hi, this is Josh Aldridge from the Winnipeg Sun. I'm wondering, what was the tipping point for this? Yes, you're relying on the advice of Dr. Wilson, but what was the reasoning for him saying this is the time now to cancel K-12 classes indefinitely? What are you guys saying? Community transmission? I know there's, I think, 2 cases of kids under 10 or people under 10 who now have COVID-19 in the province. Are these kind of the factors that are going into this decision?
You'll have the chance to ask that question of the doctor himself at 1 o'clock, Josh. I can only say that we're consistently using the science and the expertise that we have available to us in this province at every level. And we are teaming with experts in these fields, and we are acting on their advice. And this is the advice we received, and we are acting on it in the best interests of our children. And the staff, the teaching staff.
My follow-up is,
Go ahead.
My follow-up is there going to be an adjustment to the education budget? Obviously, you guys said you're not recommending teachers being laid off or fired, but we are making sure that they can still be used. But schools aren't actually going to be in. There's going to be a lot less pressure when it comes to utilities and infrastructure, and you need to clean them constantly. Is there going to be a redirection of funds from the schools to aid in healthcare expenditures?
2 points. One, we maintain some of the highest levels of spending on education in the country, and we plan on continuing to do that because we think it's the best investment we can make, an investment in our children. Secondly, of course, there are going to be dynamic changes to the budgets all over the province because we live in an unprecedented time.
From the CHTM, Navi.
Good morning, Navi Ball with CHTM. I just wanted to ask what the plan is for students and their families in regards to those who need extra assistance or who may have learning disorders. What's the plan with that now that this is more of a long-term thing for the time being?
So we've maintained the communication daily with the school divisions to see where there are challenges, whether that is getting material to students more remotely or whether there are special needs that are involved for students. So we'll continue that daily dialogue and meeting challenges as best we can when they arise. Obviously, not every challenge is foreseeable, but every challenge is taken seriously and is being addressed seriously by officials within my department and with the education system more broadly.
And for the teacher assessments that will take the place of provincial exams for the school year, will those assessments have to be prepared by the teachers themselves, or will the province assist in that in any way?
So a lot of those assessments already exist, and so it'll be a continuation of what teachers have done before. And I mean, they're just doing tremendous work in adjusting to this new reality. I sometimes think back to the flood of 1997, and while we remember the water, I think what I remember more than anything is how people got together, whether that was on sandbags or bringing food or doing different things. That's my lasting memory of that crisis, and I think the lasting memory of this pandemic is going to be how Manitobans, whether that's teachers or parents or in every walk of life, did extraordinary things in extraordinary times. And so we continue to rely on the extraordinary nature of Manitobans, and they continue to do even more than I could have imagined.
Thank you.
From the Brandon Sun, Colin.
Hi there, Colin Clark from the Brandon Sun here. I was wondering if the indefinite suspension of classes is going to change the normal completion date for the school year or the school year coming up, or if those dates are still the same as they would normally be.
So we've been getting lots of questions about whether or not the school year might extend into summer, and while we can't predict what the virus will do in terms of its spread or how the social distancing requirements will change. As that changes, it's difficult to put a timeline on it. I would say that we wouldn't want to it would certainly not be our preference to move into those July or August months, particularly if there is the opportunity there for things to move to a more normal state in terms of how people conduct their lives. I'm very concerned. I know the Premier has expressed concern and taken some action on the mental health of individuals in the province as a result of this pandemic. And as Education Minister, I think a lot about the mental health of students and of teachers and parents as well. And if there is an opportunity in those traditional summer months of July and August for people to sort of reset and process some of what we've gone through and to return to a more normal existence, then I would like to see that opportunity happen and then begin the school year in a traditional way in September, if that's possible. But obviously, we're waiting to see what the timelines look like.
My follow-up question is on a slightly different education matter. Will the indefinite suspension of classes further delay the release of the K-12 Commission report and the implementation of its recommendations?
Well, yeah, it will. It will because teachers, parents, students are all facing up to a monumental challenge that is without precedent, and we will get to the release of the report and a full discussion of the report and implementation of changes following discussion as people in Manitoba. And that time has to be taken because this is an historic thing that hasn't happened in over half a century, and we need to review how we deliver education to do a better job for our children. Everybody, I think, agrees on that. I hope everyone agrees also that this is a time that's filled with enough challenges without adding any stresses to that right now. I can only say in closing, because I believe that's our last questioner, one more. I won't say anything in closing then.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Yes, we return to Maggie from the Free Press.
Hi, Minister Geortzen and Premier. Just one question for you in terms of the province issuing directives to convocations, proms, all that kind of thing. Will the province be issuing such a directive on those?
Well, I would assume that convocation would be considered a public gathering. It would fall under the same guidelines that exist from Dr. Roussin and the public health orders, so they would be following the same orders that exist. Again, though, I thank you for raising the point, Maggie, of those grade 12 students, because in particular for them, I know that this can be a difficult time, and they would have been looking forward to something entirely different in their grade 12 year. This decision is about protecting them and protecting those that they love, and I do hope at some point in the future down the road, it might not be exactly in the normal time frame that we have, but that there will be opportunity to celebrate the grads of this year in a time that it's safe for them to do so. And my guess is that whether we're celebrating Manitoba 150 then or graduations, that it'll be some of the best celebrations Manitobans have ever had.
All right, this is my follow-up in terms of the cleaning and that is being done in schools. Is that going to continue with janitorial staff doing sanitation in there with the expectation that schools may resume as usual?
It will, because there are still in many schools child care centers which are going to be operating, and teachers who may still be accessing the building to retrieve resources or to get resources, prepare resources for students. And so there will need to continue to be social distancing within those schools, even with a lot less people, but where there is that interaction, and the cleaning would continue as well.
Thank you, Minister.
I'll wrap it up now and say again, thank you to Kelvin Geortzen and his team for their tremendous work. Thank you to Manitobans for following the directives, doing your part to stay healthy. Each of us, as we face challenging times, goes back in our memory and looks for comfort in experiences in the past or guidance. For me, 41 years ago, right about now, I was teaching in Gladstone when the White Mud River flooded, and we had a school closure for over a 3-week period, as I recall. But what happened there was truly something that I'll never forget. The parents, the school trustees, the administrators, the team of teachers, and the students all worked together, and we made sure that our kids got the educational opportunities we could provide in that stressful environment, such as happening now. At that time, we didn't have an internet. It was the phone, and we essentially just used the phone to stay in contact with our students and to address issues one at a time. It was time-consuming, but it was rewarding too. And as a teacher, I'll never forget those times. So I just want to close by saying a thank you to parents for stepping up, to students for stepping up, and I will say in particular to teachers for stepping up. This is a time of great challenge, but it's also a time of great opportunity, and new methods and new mechanisms that can work are going to be discovered. And we're going to find a better way to teach and a better way to affect a child's learning experience as a consequence of these challenges too. So just say thank you to all of those who are responding. A special thank you to our frontline teachers for the work they're doing. Together we'll beat this thing. Thank you.